Hey everybody, we're Tillison Consulting and we love digital marketing, and you're listening to the Inside Digital podcast. This is your one-stop shop to learn and expand your knowledge within the digital marketing space. It's never been more important to have an online presence, and in this show, our experts will talk about SEO, PPC, and everything in between. They'll share their personal insights, experiences, and strategies they're taking advantage of so the rest of us can do the same. Here's today's episode.
Hi, I'm Mark Tillison. I've been doing this digital marketing stuff for 20 odd years. Today we are talking about Google Search Console. I'm joined by Nick. Say hi, Nick.
Hello, my name is Nick. I lead the SEO team here at Tillison Consulting. Unlike Mark, I haven't been doing this for more than 10 years, so I'm a little bit greener, but still getting there. Yeah.
Cool. So you're in the hot seat, I guess, but
Yeah.
we're just going to talk about lots of questions we get asked about Google Search Console kind of regularly. So we're not going to go too in depth with this today, but just answering some of the broader stuff that we typically get asked. So let's start with a simple one. So Nick, what is Google Search Console? Obviously, we use it every day. You use it every day. You can almost move your mouse blindly. We use it so much. What is it? What would it do if I had a small business?
Yeah.
Why would I care about it?
Yeah, that's a good question, really. So fundamentally, it's a tool that's owned by Google, as the name would suggest, that allows you to understand how your website is performing in organic search. So the fundamental thing you need to understand about Google Search Console is it is all organic search. You won't get insight into how your paid traffic, how your paid channels are performing, the traffic you're getting from from socials and stuff like that. It's purely organic search. So what it does is it basically allows you to fundamentally understand how your website is performing in organic search. We use it day in, day out as an agency for businesses that are trying to scale, trying to improve their SEO. And you get a lot of really good insight into how individual pages are performing. You can see, what the common queries people are using when they're finding your website, how you're ranking, how well you're ranking for specific queries. But it's also a really good tool in diagnosing a lot of the technical issues you have on your website as well. So we'll get into this later on in this podcast, but you get a really good report on the indexing status of your pages, as well as the mobile responsiveness aspects of that. So all around, it's one of my favorite tools. If I can use it instead of Google Analytics, I nearly always will. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think it's an important distinction. So we were saying before that this is kind of a window into organic traffic, very specifically. So Google Analytics is more a multi-channel tool. So you should, as long as it's configured properly, you'll be able to see data for visits from paid search, from Google Shopping, from display, from social media, from your emails that you're sending out. That's kind of multi-channel, whereas Search Console very specifically is Search Console, as it suggests. So an important distinction. I think for me, some of the technical crawl side of stuff is really useful to understand what Google thinks of your website. So obviously there are third-party tools that have been created which help companies do SEO, but obviously agencies like us do SEO and monitoring rankings, things like that. And they do their own crawls and their own recommendations. But Search Console is what Google thinks of your website. So that's like the horse's mouth. So I wouldn't rely completely on it, but I find it really useful for insights and to create kind of opportunities. Really, you kind of go, wow, I didn't even think about ranking for that. That didn't even come up in my keyword research. That's like really helpful. So I think that understanding how your site is surfacing in search and then being able to optimize those things, there's some really quick wins that come out of that. So I think that's really helpful. The other side of things about, if you've just written a blog post about something and you're kind of going, well, I want this indexed, I want this kind of crawled, I want this in Google, I wanted to get it found. So, being able to just say, here's a new URL I just created, can you index it now and be able to request that? So as long as you're not doing dozens and dozens of requests, then that's a good way to get those, get that process started. And then the reports around well, look, we've found all this content on your website. We're aware of all these URLs, and some sites we see it's like we've discovered, Google has discovered like 4,000 URLs, and we've only indexed like 1,000 of them. What about the other 3,000? What's the problem with those? So you can then start to understand, well, look, we're throwing all this content at Google and loads of it's junk. So you can then identify and go, well, I'm wasting Google's time with this stuff. How do I then optimize it so it stops Googlebot kind of looking at all that junk content? Or maybe it's the problem with the website that's creating that. Like, again, I can go and fix that. So it's going to identify kind of opportunities about how Googlebot is behaving, what is getting indexed, what is getting ranked, and more importantly, what isn't. And then you can understand why not. Some of that will be stuff you do want indexed, and other stuff will be, actually, that's duplicate. Why is my content creating? Why is my website creating this duplicate content? So I think really, really helpful, just to kind of have that view of what does Google really think of my website? How can I help Google kind of do a better job, really?
Yeah, I think there's also like quite a surface level value that I think it can really provide to a lot of small business owners and the clients we work with anyway, because the amount of times in a day I'll be speaking to a client and they'll simply just want to know, well, what pages do we have that actually perform the best? Like, which ones are actually getting the most clicks? Granted, you'll just be seeing data from organic search, but you can have that information within 10 seconds if you really wanted to. It's a really, really easy way for people to get that really simple idea of how they're actually doing, which is, I think, really powerful. And I think more people would benefit from knowing how to do that with Google Search Console.
Interesting.
So if we go specifically then into that problem solving thing that we touched upon, using Google Search Console to diagnose and identify why things might not be performing as best as they can, what are some of the main things you use within Google Search Console to do that?
So I guess there's kind of two sides to it, I think, which are very different. We talked about that report you can see that shows you these are the search queries you're showing up for, things like that. That's really useful. So that's kind of, these are the results that you have. Whereas the other side of it, which is more about the crawling and the indexing and all the machine that Google is running, is better to understand these are the problems you have that you might want to look at. So I tend to look at it, I don't kind of look at those two things at the same time. They're different workflows for me. So I would tend to be saying, well, if I'm looking for some quick wins to get some more traffic, I might kind of go into those results and say, well, I know I've got some good rankings, I'm getting some good traffic on these 3 or 4 particular pages, these 3 or 4 URLs. And then what I might do is click on one of these URLs and say, well, what queries am I surfacing for? Oh, well, I'm ranked like 5th for this particular term, but I don't really mention that term in that page. So if I optimized it a little bit for that term, that could be a really quick win. I could get ranked number 1 just by doing a little piece of work on that. So it's really valuable for those kind of quick wins and spotting those opportunities. That's one workflow. The other workflow is about like the overall quality of the website, and that affects every single page in it. So you're kind of working in the macro here. It's like, this is my entire website. So then I'm really looking for, like big problems. Why have I got, like I said before, why have I got 4,000 or 5,000 pages here that Google's trying to access and crawl and index, and 3,000 or 4,000 of them, it's just going, well, we're not going to do anything with this. So I need to therefore understand, well, there's a problem there with the website, or maybe the URLs, the links on the page that are being created by the code that generates the website. So the CMS does weird things. So we've had this a lot with e-commerce stores where, I don't know, recent issue, for example, with a client site where there was a change on the website, and we obviously have links to product URLs, but this then created a link to the product URLs with a parameter like add to cart on the end. And that basically created a duplicate of every single page. And we don't want that, and Google doesn't want that. So you can spot that problem in that kind of crawl area. So as I say, it's more that macro side of things. We don't have 5,000 pages. We don't want Google crawling 5,000 pages. Actually, these 2,500 pages are important, and all that other stuff is junk. So it helps identify that problem. You can't solve it in Search Console. It's just going to highlight that problem to you. So yeah, really good for spotting those kind of crawl issues and helping to understand, like I said, like Google's kind of getting misdirected or misled in terms of that content, and then you can take action from there. So these are my two kind of general workflows, is kind of where are my quick wins, my opportunities to improve, kind of rankings and more specific page or keyword level, search query level. And then the second part is looking at the kind of crawl, what is happening, what's being crawled, what's being indexed. I think it's useful, and maybe we do another show on this. It's useful to understand actually how Google works with a website, because I think a lot of people misunderstand this. So the kind of perception is that Google just comes along, looks at my page, crawls it, and then decides where to index and where to rank it. And that is what it does, but it doesn't do that in one hit. So it's first going to discover a URL, and there is part of the process that this just says discovery, here is a URL, and it throws it in a bucket and goes, this is queued for index, for crawling. So then you've got this big crawl bucket of pages you want Google to crawl. So the more times it finds that URL in your website or externally, the more requests there are in the bucket for the same URL, the more likely it is then to go and crawl it. So then it's going to crawl it, render that page, and then understand what that content is, and then it's going to index it. So there are three separate bits of the process, which can take a while. It doesn't always happen immediately. So I think really important to understand that, so that you're kind of going, well, why isn't my page showing up in Google? Well, it hasn't been discovered yet. Hasn't been discovered, then it can't be crawled, and therefore it can't be indexed. Or it's been discovered, but it hasn't yet been crawled. Well, why not? Speed up, press the button. I want that done now. And that just doesn't work. So you just have to be patient with some of that stuff. If it's been sitting there for a long time, and this can happen, then, and when I say a long time, it's like if that's been there for a week and it's been kind of discovered but not indexed, usually it's typically down to quality issue. Google's kind of seen it and gone, this isn't a valuable page. Like you've already got a page that answers this query on your website already, so I'm just going to ignore it. Or this doesn't add any value to the internet at all. So this question is already answered better than how you're doing it. You've just got this, I don't know, 200, 300 words about whatever the topic is, and it's not very well optimized. It's like, but that's the same as somebody else has already answered that question. So why would Google go to the trouble of spending actual money, which ultimately it's doing? It still has to pay for the resources to store that page and index it and rank it. Why would it do that with billions and billions of pages that are a waste of time? So that's what happens a lot of the time. Usually if it's sitting there kind of discovered, not crawled or not indexed, then it's usually, you probably have to look at that content and go, really be ultra critical. Is this really valuable? Is this a different spin on this? Is it a better answer? Is it useful? Is it helpful? And if you're being ultra critical and honest with yourself, if the answer is no, that's probably why it's not getting indexed.
Fundamentally.
So what have you found with your kind of workflows? Is it typical, or other bits that you do that I don't?
The process you've described is kind of exactly how I would do it. That sort of discovery element you talked about in the first half of your answer about, I'll go into the performance section and look at the rankings, the queries and stuff too. As we use the term, find those quick wins and do that. That's a separate process to diagnosing some technical issues, I guess. So my way of using it is probably very similar to you, and I also got taught by you, so that's probably going to be the case.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I think you covered all that really nicely. There's not much else I'd really add to that, I think.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of kind of best practices, we talked about this a little bit, I guess, already. What are you typically using Search Console for to increase ranking and visibility? Is there a workflow you would typically use, and how often do you use that?
Yeah, I think, well, how often do we do it? Well, it will depend really on like the client's requirements, I guess. There's no one size fits all solution when how frequently we would check to optimize, well, not optimize that, to look to see what we could improve for a specific client. But if we were under the assumption that someone was fresh into Google Search Console, my process is just going to that performance section, and then obviously you go off of the data there. So one really important thing to understand, and what we discussed about off camera, is that the data you're first presented with in that performance section is it's everything, right? So it's global. You're not filtering it by any sort of particular pages, page types. You're not filtering it by device if that's important to you. So you really do need to filter that data to get the fairest representation, because if you were to look at the average rank for your entire website within Google Search Console, you'll see a number like between 50 and 80, and you'll immediately panic because you think, well, everything sucks here, right? But it doesn't, because what Google Search Console does is it's taking everything, right? You might have a heap of queries. Well, you might be surfacing for a heap of queries that are kind of relevant to your website, but not at all. You know, something really, really short tail that isn't really going to drive relevant traffic for. You might be on page whatever for it, but because the search volume is so high, you're getting featured so often for it, and that's inevitably going to skewer that data, because it's going to bring the rest of it down. Whereas in reality, you could be ranking really well for some of those search queries that people are using that you really care about, that are really essential to your business. So it's about filtering the data so you're seeing and getting a report on what you actually care about. So my advice to anyone looking to do that is just, if you were looking at, say, your informational content, you wanted to get in front of more people for, you know, the standard what, whys and hows questions for what your service or business is, you know, you could filter by the page type within that, check the data there, and just take a look at the stuff that's getting good impressions but you're not ranking well for. Have a look at the stuff that, what's that sweet spot we like to say? So if something's on page ranked between 6 and 10.
The cliche of low-hanging fruit.
The cliche of low-hanging fruit. Take a look at the stuff that's like falling below rank 5 or something, if it's getting closer to that, because obviously you want to be on page 1 inevitably, but anything you can do to improve that and get closer to the positions 3, 2, and 1 is the best bet. So yeah, I think I may have gone a bit off piece with that, but that's cool. I think it's really important to look at the data correctly before you jump to any conclusions really about how you're performing.
Yeah, I guess what you're saying is that when you're looking at the whole data, there is no relevance filter within that. It's literally everything. Yeah. So, you know, when you look at the data, you know, you might be looking at, I don't know, let's say it's a chiropractor's website, and you know, it ranks for the word back. Yeah. And it's like, well, yeah, it's kind of relevant, but you're never going to be number 1 for that, because that's not the intent behind that search. But your website still ranks for it kind of accidentally. Yeah. So that's where you get these kind of huge skews. Yes. So, you know, if it's, you know, a local business, then you might just rank accidentally for the word Portsmouth, but on like page 5. But there's loads of searches for, you know, the football team or any number of other things in that city. So there's basically a load of irrelevant junk in there that skews that overall metric of, oh, my average rank is 48.7. Oh, it's terrible. It's not. It's just telling you your average rank for everything, warts and all. So yeah, I think filtering those out, which you can do by filtering queries and using regex, things like that. And also, I think a key thing for me for most businesses is kind of going, just show me where I am in the UK. Because if you kind of go, well, I've got this really important page that I'm trying to rank, and you click on it, it's like, oh, our average rank is like 48 or something. And you go, well, a lot of it's irrelevant. Let's filter out or filter in the relevant stuff. Oh, my average rank is still 20. You know, we're nowhere near the top. Okay, just show me the UK. Oh, our average rank is 3. Okay, now we're looking at relevant queries in the relevant location. Yeah. We're actually doing really well. You just have to filter out all that junk. Yeah. So use the location filter. Use the filter on like page URL includes or a specific URL, and like specific queries as well. So, you know, the search query includes, you know, part of the thing you'd want to rank for. So if you're a school, then if it includes the word school or academy or junior or infant or something like that, and those are the things that are now relevant, and ignore all that other stuff. Like I see a lot. It's like, oh, we rank for a postcode. Well, great. Yeah. So just like, so what? Like there's 20 other like I don't know, buildings in this same postcode, so it could be like
Exactly.
anything. Or,
Yeah.
or maybe your business is in, you know, some office space where there's like 50 like other offices, all with websites.
Yeah.
And it's like, but yeah, that's just pointless.
Yeah.
So it's just filtering out that stuff.
Yeah,
I think
100%.
it's really important.
Yeah. And I think just to add on to that as well, I think it's a really valuable tool in auditing the actual content on your website as well. So filtering that data, taking a look at which pages are actually getting clicks. You know, if you are in a position where you really want to strip down the number of pages you've got on your website, or you're looking at everything and thinking we should really cull some of this, you can have a look at that and just get rid of some of the stuff that's getting no traffic, no impressions at all. It's another really useful tool we use for that process as well when it warrants it too. So.
Yeah, and worth addressing that point. So we recently did an audit with a really big site that we look after, and we discovered that there were 14,000 pages or more on that website that had never shown in Google search at all.
Ever.
Like within, I think it was like a 12-month period.
Oh my God.
So it was like, yeah, okay, look, in the context, there are like 30,000 pages or something, but half of their pages they had were just a complete waste. Google had discovered them, or not at all, but a lot of them it had discovered and just got on not indexing them. And basically what we're doing is going, well, 40% of our content is junk, and that 40% is going to pull down everything else. So it's like you're harming the good stuff by having all this bad stuff. So it's like having, you know, the proverbial bad apple. So yeah, understanding that in Search Console, but also comparing that with Google Analytics data and kind of going, well, look, these pages, pulling that data together, they've never had a visit in 12 months from any source. So not come through paid, they haven't navigated, no one's actually looked at that page. That page has never been served to a user at all in 12 months, and it's never shown up in the rankings in Google search. Well, it's junk. Get rid of it. Okay, but you're right. Search Console is one of the tools that we would use to do that. Okay, so let's move on to quickfire round. Can Google Search Console provide insights into the performance of rich results like featured snippets?
It's something I'm not as knowledgeable on.
Short answer is no. It doesn't really tell you that stuff. So yeah, there are some of the third-party tools I think you can use, and it will tell you, oh, you've got the rich snippet, or you've got you know, you've got an image next to your result, or you've got site links next to your result, or something like that. And they will do that. But with Search Console, it doesn't tell you that. No. Not very clearly.
No. You can get a small diagnosis on some of the pages that might be missing schema markup, which can influence it. But outside of that, you don't really get that level of detail, which is a bit of a shame.
Okay.
For you, or for us to answer. So the sitemaps feature in Google Search Console, how does it benefit website owners? I think quite an underrated one, actually.
Yeah, so I think you have to understand what a sitemap is first.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a whole other show, but let's assume you understand what a sitemap is, or go on our website and search for sitemap and you will find a whole bunch of content on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, essentially a sitemap is a list of the pages on your website that you feel are important, and you submit that in Search Console. So it's kind of like a big signpost, kind of, here you go, Google, please like prioritize these pages. Here are the really important pages of my website. So, and of course you will get like issues with those. So it'll be like, well, you've put this page in your sitemap, but it's a 404 or it's being redirected or something. So it will pick up things like that. So he's kind of going, hey, this is really important, but not so important that it actually exists anymore. So there's these kind of misdirections. So that's really useful. Most of the CMS platforms, you know, WordPress and Magento and Shopify, those kinds of things, they would have baked in tools or third-party plugins where you just have that sitemap and it automatically updates on your website, and then Search Console will pick that up. So the minute you go, here's a new page, it publishes to your sitemap, the sitemap refreshes, and Search Console can see there's a new page and it should automatically therefore index it. So it's a way of kind of automatically go, here's our good content, or we've got a new piece and another piece and another piece, or that bit's removed or whatever. So I think really, really useful, but really easy if you don't do it properly, or you're not kind of using a decent tool, or maybe there's multiple people using your website and they deleted some stuff, or they, I don't know, they redirected something which is still published.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of stuff can cause those issues, and you would see those kinds of errors in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, really useful.
Yeah.
I think just to kind of go, here's my content, please index it.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it will be indexed, but at least you've got an option to go, this is the stuff that I'd really, you can steer Googlebot and help it prioritize.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's really useful. Any limitations or drawbacks to using Google Search Console?
I think the thing with Google Search Console is, as good as I think it is, I think if you're new into the analytics thing, the analytics sphere, and getting used to looking at the performance of your website, it can feel a little bit difficult to learn and navigate, because the data itself can feel simple enough, but it's the language used is kind of baked into the SEO world of language and stuff like that. So
it's a bit technical.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with the terms like indexing or some of that other stuff, you might feel a bit lost in just navigating, but you quickly pick it up. I think other things people might consider a limitation that is just part of its functionality is that it is organic data and you don't get insight into the other channels. So I think that could be considered a drawback, but it's not really part of its function. So did you have any thoughts on that?
I think there's a limitation in the amount of data that you have access to.
Yeah, of course.
The default view is like 3 months, which is useful, that's helpful. And obviously you can kind of filter that down and go, well, what about this search term? How many times have I shown? Have I shown more? Has my ranking kind of increased? And those kinds of things. That's really useful. You can change that to kind of 3 months versus previous 3 months, or 6 months versus previous 6 months, or 3 months versus the same 3 months in the previous year. So you can do a year on year, but it will only hold 16 months worth of data, I think. So, and then it just kind of disappears. So I think that's a limitation you just kind of need to be aware of. If you're really mad keen to compare year on year data, you could just export it and then use an offline tool to do that. You also have some limitations around the data you can see for any specific thing. So it will only show you 1,000 of anything. So if you want to look at the search queries, it will only show you the first 1,000. If you want to, you can export that data and dump that into a Google Sheet or something, and then you can analyze it there. But it will, again, only give you 1,000 rows of data. So it might give you 1,000 URLs, or it might give you 1,000 search queries, or whatever that might be in the period you're looking at. So then you get into, well, okay, let me take that 3 months, and then the previous 3 months, and the previous 3 months, and then merge them all together in a spreadsheet, and it's a massive pain. But there is a sneaky way of kind of getting around that, which is to use Looker Studio and connect Search Console to that. And then you can basically get all of that data and get around that limitation. And then you can export that as a CSV and pull up in Google Sheets and get a bigger set of data. So it's kind of a workaround, but it does make me think, well, if I can do that with Google Looker Studio and Google Sheets from Google Search Console, why don't you just let me do it from Google Search Console? It would be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah. So when you're getting kind of deep into that data, when you're talking about big data sets, I think that's that's a real limitation. You only hit that when you're talking about kind of a big website that ranks for lots and lots and lots of variations of kind of keywords and search terms. So for most small businesses, I don't think you'll kind of run into that too often. No. But for some of the bigger sites that we look after and that we work with and optimize, that can be a bit of a wall. I think that one.
Definitely. Yeah. Cool. So we've kind of spoken about this already. Just didn't know if you had any more thoughts to add to this. So when it comes to crawl errors, how do you typically use that to identify and resolve those errors?
So I guess this kind of falls in the previous question, which is what are the limitations as well. So with a lot of the third-party SEO tools, it might kind of lead you into recommendations of how to solve that problem. Whereas Search Console is just going, this is what happened, deal with it. And it's like, it doesn't particularly guide you in terms of why might that be happening? Where should I look on my website to understand what that is? So you end up kind of seeing this error and then going to Google and searching for it and trying to find some helpful content or a YouTube video that kind of goes, this is what causes it. And then you have to do a heap of investigation. So I think there is, and I think necessarily it's not fair to say that Google's doing a bad job, because every website is different, right? All the CMSs are different. That particular issue might be specific to Magento, or it might be specific to WordPress, or maybe what your issue is might be because your website has been built in a custom way, and the way the developers have built it, it does a particularly kind of odd thing that creates all these kind of duplicate URLs or whatever the problem might be, but that's unique to your website. So you can't possibly kind of go, oh, it's always this, because the cause isn't always the same. So I think that is a challenge. But that's not what the tool's intended for. The tool is intended to say, this is Google's view of your website. This is what Googlebot is doing. This is how you are surfacing. But it is really good for kind of going, there is a problem. Well, why am I getting all that? Now I need to research what's causing that. And that technical SEO, it's really just down to experience. When you've been doing this kind of as long as I have, you go, oh, I know what that is. I've come across that before, and I know where to look more quickly than other people, perhaps, just because I'm an old guy, right? So I kind of been around the block. I've been there, done it, and every pane of every website kind of ever. It feels like I've kind of got around, But so you normally know where to look if you're a bit more experienced, or you end up just mashing Google search to try and go, what question do I ask? How do I ask this question to understand why this is happening? And then you go through we've all done it. You kind of go down a blind alley and you think, oh, this looks right. Oh, no, it's not that. Oh, what? No, it's not that. And eventually you kind of stumble across the answer, or at least a theory. And then you go knocking on your web developer's door or your webmaster's door and go, the website's doing this. Can you stop it doing that, please? So some useful stuff. So URL inspection tool. I mean, that's one that we use a lot. So what is it? Why should I care?
So I think our usage might differ a bit, and you might have a different workflow with this. But the URL inspection tool is really handy. So you can paste the URL of any page that you'd like to get a bit of information on, paste it into there, and you get to see the indexing status of that. It's really handy if you're publishing new content and you want that to be prioritized in Google's next crawl. You can request it to be bumped up the priority queue for the crawl, basically. I look at this every day, and I know there's text there about what else is in there, but I kind of ignore it. So I'm not kind of sure what else it does. Do you pay attention to the other bits in that?
I think the typical workflow for me, obviously there are various kind of different bits in that process, but the typical thing that happens is we've created a blog post, like we've got one on our site at the moment, and the blog post has been written, and it's a nice in-depth piece of content. It's really well optimized, got the right H1s and H2s, right kind of length. It should rank really well. It's in a topic that we have a lot of authority about, so it should rank like straight away. Like within a week, we'd expect that to be on the first 2 pages of Google, right? It's not massively competitive term, but it's a helpful piece of content, so it should rank immediately. So I'm looking at that like 3 weeks in and going, it's not indexed. Why is it not indexed? So my first thought is, well, okay, I can use that URL inspection tool. Here's the URL, Google, tell me what's wrong with it. So then it's first going to say to me, all right, we've discovered this, we haven't indexed it, or we haven't crawled it. Well, why not? But it's great content, index it immediately, right? Put it at number 1 on Google. Why are you not doing that? But then that will give me some clues from the database where it will say, firstly, it's like I said, it's kind of discovered, but it's not crawled. So I know it's waiting for something, or maybe it thinks it's poor quality. Maybe I have to go and look at that piece of content or whatever. Maybe I have to build some more internal links to that piece of content to kind of go, look, here's a nudge, 3, 4, 5, 6 other links to it will help potentially with that issue. Now, let's say that actually we've got past that point and it's just not ranking anywhere. It will tell you things like, well, this page, actually, you've said that you've canonically linked this to itself. So basically, this is my page, and this is the only version of this page. This is the important one. Whereas Google's found another version of the page or a similar page and said, actually, we don't believe you. We've used a different one. And then it's canonicalized that. Or maybe somebody accidentally put a canonical URL to another page. So it will identify, again, what Google is viewing of that. So that's kind of pulling data from the database. But you can then say, well, crawl the live page and then tell me what you think. Maybe you made some changes and then you want to go, crawl, show me a live, go and crawl it and tell me what you think right now. So that's not saying crawl it and index it and do all that stuff. That's just saying, go and crawl it for me and show me what you think. And then it will give you a live representation of what it discovered. So you will discover very quickly, oh, we couldn't find that page, it's a 404. Or actually the URL that you're trying to rank is being redirected somewhere else. That's why it's not happening. So really useful for kind of troubleshooting those things with that that tool, the URL inspection tool.
Yeah. Excellent. So the big one, and now we're always at the mercy of what Google will want us to know, and sometimes they famously don't give us a lot to go off of. But do you have any insight into what's next for Google Search Console? Any speculative thoughts?
Yeah, you're right. I think you have to speculate.
Yeah.
I think the really interesting thing for me, obviously, heard just this morning the most popular word of the year is AI.
Of course.
And it's grown like fourfold,
wow,
literally in that 12-month period. So it's just exploded, which we all know about. We're all using AI. AI is being used to kind of do all sorts of stuff, whether you are hands-on using it or you're using services and other things. AI is being used kind of everywhere and has been for a while. So what that's led to is kind of this movement towards search generative experience, which some people are using. Obviously, if you use search engines like Bing, that's starting to use a lot of that stuff. So the interesting thing comes when I think about how we use kind of voice now, with Alexa or Google Home or those types of devices. When I start to think about, well, where is search going, I start to imagine this kind of iterative kind of experience with search. Whereas today we'd go to Google and we'd say, okay, restaurants near me. I'm thinking about going out for dinner. Where should I go? I'm looking for inspiration, and then I might see a bunch of go, actually, I quite fancy Italian. So what do? Restaurants near me, Italian, or Italian restaurants near me. It's another search, and it surfaces content, right? So what that means is in Search Console, I can start to see, well, I've surfaced for restaurants near me or Italian restaurants near me and things like that, because there's an instance of a search with a specific query. That doesn't really work when you're talking about an iterative search experience. So if you imagine having a voice conversation with, Alexa or Google Home or something, how does that represent in Google Search? Because there aren't two instances. It's not two separate searches. It's a continuation. So my conversation might be, where should we go for dinner on Friday night? And it might suggest a bunch of things. It might talk to me. It might talk back to me and say, well, what kind of food do you like? What are you feeling like? We got Italian, we got Greek, we got Indian. What do you think? Oh, actually, I quite fancy Italian, right? So then it's going to start talking to me. But my search query is now, I quite fancy Italian, right? So, you surfaced for I quite fancy Italian, right? And then it might say to me, oh, well, do you want somewhere like expensive or cheap? And I'll go, oh, expensive, right? So now you surfaced for, oh, expensive, right? It doesn't make sense in the Search Console to tell me that I ranked for, oh, expensive, right? It doesn't make sense. So I think I'm like, how is Google going to manage that? How are you can't give me the thread of that conversation because it's personal data.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is what you're describing is like an eventual fundamental shift that we're going to see when it comes to how people search for things on Google. And when Google are often asked about SEO bits and what should we do with this page and how does that work and stuff like that, I sometimes, and I don't know if you feel the same, I sometimes get the impression that they want us to care far less than we do about that. They often say, just focus on maintaining the website and we'll figure out how to rank that. Is there a part of you that worries that our autonomy to understand that data and monitor those things is going to be kind of scaled back and we'd eventually be able to see less than that? Because as you've described, if we move towards search conversations and that data is confidential, are we just going to start seeing less and less? Do you think Google are going to give us that data?
Well, I think they have to. They don't have
really?
They have to stop giving it to us, is what I mean. Because you can't give me that conversation, because that, that almost reveals too much. It's like, some of the data that we do or don't get in Google Ads, for example. We don't get, they search for this, then they search for that, then they search for that, and then they search for this, and then they search for this, and then they click your ad. We don't get that journey. Google has it, but that's private data. And so we shouldn't have access to that. And we don't, and that's fair. But I think when you talk about this conversational search, or these conversational queries, I think you also have to imagine, probably already, but in the not too distant future, the conversation that you're having with a device already knows you. So it already has information about you, and you know that it has that information. So it already knows that, I don't know, let's say you're celiac, right? So when you say, where should we go for dinner on Friday night? It knows the context of that query is celiac, right? Because it's you. But I don't need to have that query, and you're not going to type that into Google anymore. You're just going to have that conversation. So it becomes less meaningful, or it becomes so specific that it's personal, and we can't have that. So yeah, I think there has to be some measurement, right? There has to be some measurement about what you're doing to be able to say, this is worth investing more time in, or I invested all this time, what was the result of that? So even now, today, you can go into Search Console and go, how many times did this page surface in Google search? And if you imagine that without the query data, is that valuable enough? What did it rank for? Well, I don't know, and I can't tell you, right? But I think it feels like we're on the kind of precipice of a massive change.
Big time. Big time.
In terms of, we've kind of been spoiled with this very specific data. Which does bring me back actually to the limitations. So one of the frustrations that I have is when you look in Search Console and go, oh, this page has had like 150 clicks in the last 30 days. And you go, oh, wow, that's doing really well. And then you go and look at the queries and it goes, oh, it hasn't any clicks, many queries. And you're like, what? What did it, how? I didn't, it's like, what did it rank for then? You surely at least one search term got one click. And it's like, no, it didn't get any clicks from any queries. So it just doesn't share the query data with you. So that's a frustration, and maybe there are reasons for that I don't understand. But yeah, that's a limitation. But I think the evolution of kind of search and that conversational stuff, I think is that's going to be a very big learning journey for everybody. There is, I guess, one thing to wrap up on then, which is, how do I get access to Search Console?
Search Console is free.
Okay.
But you have to verify your access, verify your site with it. They give you a handful of ways of doing that. So you can either just add a snippet of code to your website. You can verify it through Tag Manager if you've similarly done that. You can add HTML, can't you?
Yeah, so HTML kind of page basically uploaded to the root of your website. Yeah, I mean, the usual one is the meta tag. That's usually the easiest way to go.
It is, yeah.
So if you're running something like WordPress and Yoast, it's literally just get that tag, put it into Yoast, save it, validate, and you're in.
Yeah.
So that's usually the way to go. But there are a few options in there.
Yeah.
And the other neat thing that I quite like with Search Console is all that data that we talked about. It's already in there.
Yeah.
So it's not like analytics where you go, I've created an account, now add the tag, now it starts recording data and giving me useful stuff. With Search Console, it's already there.
Yeah.
You're just kind of opening the box and going, ooh, lots of goodies.
Yeah.
So that's really neat. I quite like that. And you can't manipulate the data very easily in there. So with other tools, you might be able to say, okay, I want to label these URLs in a certain way so I can filter them and stuff like that. You can't do any of that stuff in Search Console, which is, I'd like it, but it's not Google's job. So, yeah, cool.
Finally.
Good. Well, that's a wrap. Been really useful talking with you, Nick, about Google Search Console. I think we covered an awful lot of ground and probably established another like 3 or 4 shows that we can probably do.
I was just thinking we could have a whole like tinfoil hat session on the future of search and what it will mean, but that's a really good topic as well. But no,
cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Inside Digital Podcast. Make sure to visit our website at tillotson.co.uk, where you can read more about the topics discussed in this show and much more. If you're looking to get started or to continue your digital marketing journey, we can help. Just reach out to one of our experts through our website. We'd love to hear if you found value in this show. Please leave a review and be sure to tune in for our next episode.